Geek Out! You wanted the best, you got me instead. That's right, it's another episode of Kiss My Podcast. This episode, we are talking about Sonic Boom from 2009. Brought my brother back, Mick. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah. He's back on, and we're ready to do this. We only got, there's only one more album after this. And this is one that I wasn't super familiar with. I think you bought it, Mick, actually. And then, we burned it on iTunes, and I listened to it from there. That's how I re-listened to it. Because for any Spotifyers out there, you're not going to be able to listen to this one on Spotify because it was sold exclusively through Walmart in the U.S. and Canada. So it's not going to be on that streaming service. So it was cool to listen to this one because, like I said, I wasn't super familiar with it. There's a couple tracks that I knew. But that's why we do this in the first place, to really know what's going on, really dive into it. So anyway, it was released on October 6th, 2009, recorded from May to August of 2009 at Conway Recording Studios in Hollywood, California, so no New York on this one. Produced by Paul Stanley and Greg Collins. Greg Collins has worked with U2 and No Doubt, to name a few. And we got 3 singles here: Modern Day Delilah, released August 19th, 2009, Say Yeah, December 8th, 2009, and Never Enough, June 8th, 2010. So we'll dive into those, of course, when we get more into the track listing here. This is their first album in 11 years. You know, the last album Mick and I talked about was Psycho Circus, and that was in 1998, and we kind of thought that was done. We talked about it last episode where when we listened to it and when I bought it, I figured that was it because they said that was it. You know, they were doing the farewell tour that year as well. Ace left, but then they kept going with Peter for a couple more years until they bring in Eric Singer on drums, who is a fantastic drummer in Kiss, and he plays in, I think, one of the best lineups, maybe the best lineup they ever had musically during the Revenge era. And Tommy Thayer, who's kind of been around with them since almost the late 80s, is now, officially brought in as, to dismay of a lot of people, the Spaceman himself. He wears the Ace Frehley makeup, and Eric Singer wears the Catman makeup. Again, I've never faulted Tommy or Eric for that. They're not, they're technically, employees of Kiss, of Ace and, of Gene and Paul. That's their call. And supposedly, Ace and Peter sold the rights to it back to Kiss. So, Kiss owns the makeup rights. I think from a business standpoint, it makes sense. Like they're not there to introduce new characters. It would I have liked to have seen new characters? Sure, but from a branding standpoint, Kiss is obviously this juggernaut of business and the branding standpoint. It made sense to bring in. The Spaceman and the Catman. So, Mick, did you ever have a problem with Tommy and Eric wearing Peter and Ace's stuff?
No, not really. I think it would have been weird to see. It's one thing when I can't believe I'm forgetting this guy's name. Who was the drummer back on?
Eric Carr.
Yeah, Eric Carr.
The Fox.
The Fox. Like, if you're gonna bring in like one new character into the band, but I think having like half the band be different, that would have been kind of weird, especially at this stage in their
Sure.
career of Kiss. So no problem at all. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the first CD that it was this lineup.
It was, it was.
Yeah,
it's the first time. I mean, the funny thing is, Tommy has played on a Kiss album before. We talked about it a lot on Psycho Circus, and Eric Singer was an official member of Kiss for a while in the 80s and early 90s. And a real solid member. And like I said, he plays on, I think, one of their best unmasked album, unless you ask, good friend Chris Nolan. He would probably say "Lick It Up," but I would say "Revenge" is their best unmasked era lineup, and I have Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho's got my back on that one. So anyway, it's I don't have a huge problem with it. I have some friends. We've always kind of talked about it, and some of them are really annoyed by it. And I can see it, of course, that it I think it looks like they're just replacing Ace and Peter, which technically they are.
Yeah.
But Ace, I think Ace is at a good place with Gene at least. They've been talking and they seem to have a good relationship. And I don't know about Peter. Peter's always kind of been, like I said, multiple times in past episodes on Face the Music, Paul Stanley's fantastic book, his autobiography. Pretty harsh on Ace and Peter, especially Peter. So again, supposedly they sold their rights to the makeup. So Gene and Paul have been there since day one. They're the bosses. It's their show.
Yeah.
And Tommy's kind of like adopted kind of a hybrid in terms of the makeup hasn't changed, but his outfit's kind of adopted this Tommy kind of like a cross between of a couple eras of Ace, which is kind of cool. So he's kind of got his own thing. So again, really, I got no problem with it. When I saw them a couple years ago, I believe they were promoting this album. And or at least coming off a tour or so after this album had come out, or that world tour, and so I saw Tommy and Eric, and they were fantastic. I think they make Kiss a better band because they're younger, and they're just they make the band tighter, I think, in terms of sound. So again, like we're saying, first album in 11 years, and like Mick was saying, first official one with Tommy and Eric Singer in the band. Eric Singer, of course, coming back. After his official time at Kiss, probably like 11 or 12 years prior. So anyway, Paul Stanley has said, I've taken this direct quote from him, the purpose of this album isn't to let people know that we're still around, it's to let people know we can still knock out anybody who's out there, which is a very Paul Stanley thing to say. I think Kiss has had a chip on their shoulder since day one, and they still forever have that chip on their shoulder, and they're there to prove it. That like Paul said, they're still out there to rock and can kick ass. Now, like I said, he wasn't happy with Psycho Circus. I don't think he was. I don't think he was. He definitely didn't seem happy to have that be their last album. I think in the back of his mind, probably even was being released, like, I don't want to go out with Psycho Circus, and made sure with this album and then the album afterwards that Psycho Circus clearly is not their final album. So in the U.S. and Canada, like I said, Walmart had distribution rights. So basically what it was kind of a packed, kind of a nice packed disc here. It had three discs in total. The album, of course. They re-recorded the Kiss Classics album, which also pissed some people off because they're basically re-recording some of their biggest hits with Tommy and Eric. And so you get a more updated sound, but I don't really need that. You know what I mean? Like I like the older stuff, and that's kind of a little shady on Kiss's end. Re-recording with those songs. But again, it's their show; they can do whatever they want. Me personally, not the biggest fan of hearing like an updated version of Detroit Rock City with Tommy and Eric. I mean, live, of course, but did they need to do it in the studio? Not really. And then they had a DVD that featured 6 songs from the Kiss Alive 35 World Tour on there. So again, you get your bang for your buck with Kiss with this CD from Walmart. Anyway, the album art, Michael Dorett did the album art for this. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he also did the cover to maybe my favorite Kiss cover of all. Well, I think Love Gun's probably their best cover, but one of my favorite covers of all time is Rock and Roll Over, which he also did the art for. So it's cool that they brought him back to the art for Sonic Boom. Before we jump into the album here, I just wanted to note there is only one other musician on this that is not one of the members of Kiss. It's Brian Whelan, who plays piano on this. He's uncredited, sacred uncredited musician on this as the piano player. But everything else is Kiss. So Mick, before we jump in, do you have anything to add? Do you remember? Because you're the one who actually bought the album when it came out.
Yeah. No, I remember. I was trying to think back to when I bought it and what the situation was and everything, because I feel like I have it somewhere at my house, but I can't find it anywhere. But no, I remember I was in college at the time, and there was a store nearby where I was living, and went over there, and luckily they had a copy of it. It wasn't the 3-disc set though. and
Yeah,
I was able to get.
they might have had just like a standard disc by that point.
Yeah, grabbed a copy of it, but it's kind of hard being, Kiss. Some of their older albums are just so, just great, great songs, great albums. It's almost hard to match that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I enjoyed listening to it, and I listened through the album a couple times today, just because I hadn't heard it in so long. But there's definitely some good songs on this album, and we'll get into it here in a second. But it's always like, if you want to get back into Kiss, like, you always go back to those albums from the '70s. But still a great Kiss album, and one I'm glad I have.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul Stanley's kind of mission statement for the album rings true. I mean, I think, and as we dive into the tracks, I have some issues with the album, but there's a couple songs on here. Like, it always comes back to me. I'm kind of like, all right, if I was gonna make a mix CD of like my favorite Kiss tracks of all time, would any of these songs show up on that? And actually, surprisingly, like one or two probably would. I'm not saying they're like up there with like Love Gun or Rock and Roll Over, or even Revenge era stuff, but there's some really good tracks on here, which is great to hear. Because Kiss is well into their 30th, the third decade by this point. So it's cool to see them, like Paul Stanley wanted to say we could still knock out anybody who's out there, which is such a classic Paul thing to say. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into it. First track here, clearly the most well-known, I think, on the album, Modern Day Delilah, written by Paul Stanley, sung by Paul Stanley. When I saw them live, I believe this is what they opened with, which was cool. And it's a pretty good song. I remember when it came out. I remember, 2009, October 2009. I was already graduated from college for a couple months. So I was back home, and I remember hearing. Well, I guess it was released in August, so I still was back home. But I remember seeing the video, and I remember. Let's see. Yeah, it was like. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was a single, and I saw the video and heard it for the first time and dug it. It was pretty cool, and I was surprised at how catchy it was, and how kind of like in your face it was, because I honestly had no idea what to expect with new Kiss. But it kind of is like a return to like the '70s era Kiss on it. It's got kind of like a Love Gun feel to it. Paul's vocals are pretty strong, but there's like that kind of scream he does, which is, I don't know if it was on purpose, but it kind of sounds a little strained. If you know the part I'm talking about, Mick. Yeah. Yeah. But like every track on this album, it sounds really good. Like the production's really slick. The band sounds really tight. But again, like his vocals sound a little bit strained on this one. But at the end of the day, I think a solid single, the smart move to be the first one to be released, and probably, if not, probably the only track that they're really gonna like reuse in any live shows, from this album. But I think a solid opener for kind of their return after 11 years.
Yeah. It's listening back to the album today, like definitely, I think this is the best song on the CD. I like the riffs in there, and then I really like how it goes from Paul's vocals, and when you get to that chorus, Gene kicks in, and like just the differences between their two voices. They've done it before on songs, but in this song, it just it blends together really well, and I thought it was super catchy. And we'll, obviously we'll go through the rest of the tracks. But it's interesting, like, how they come up with the title Sonic Boom for the album. Normally you have, like last time we did Psycho Circus, and
Mm-hmm.
The first track is Psycho Circus. So I'm just curious, if I could talk to any member of Kiss and talk to about this album. Why Sonic Boom, and why not have a song called Sonic Boom? I think that's an awesome album title. I think that would have been a cool single to have as a song, like Sonic Boom. But other than that, I think Modern Day Delilah. I think you sent me a message when this song came out, and I checked it out and I really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me really excited for the rest of the album to come out.
Yeah, I think kind of going with Paul's mission statement, I think the album title, this is just me guessing, I think the album title is more of the sound they were going for,
Yeah.
than necessarily having a title track. I mean, it would have been a great track, name. And there's a couple songs on here that could have probably been called Sonic Boom. Like my favorite track on the album, we'll get to it, definitely could have been called Sonic Boom. But yeah, I remember definitely being excited because there was new Kiss, and it was like, what the hell is it going to sound like? And do they still got it? And this song, they still got it. There's definitely moments on this album that prove it as well. But this is definitely the strongest single from the album, and I would say my second favorite track on the album, and a pretty damn strong one to say the least. But yeah, I also agree. Like the Gene, when he comes in on the chorus, Gene and Paul have such different voices. You think back at famous bands, great famous rock and roll bands with multiple singers, and you think of how different the voices are and how that works. Some people, they can't hear the difference with the Beatles' voices. I don't know if it's because I'm listening long enough, but I can hear a clear difference between John and Paul. I can hear a difference between George too, but there's a clear difference between John and Paul. And that works for songs when they do the harmonies, like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds or something. And then Queen is the best example, I think, where you get Freddie Mercury is kind of the mid to higher range, but he had a ridiculous range. And then Brian May had the lower range, and then Roger Taylor, the drummer, had the ridiculous high range. And so when you put all those voices together, it makes this crazy awesome blend. And you hear it a couple more times on this album too, where Gene and Paul really, I think, really work to their strength as vocalists and having different sounding voices and ranges. So that was cool to hear too.
Yeah.
So anyway, Russian Roulette, excuse me, is the next track, and it is written by Gene and Paul and sung by Gene. Again, the production on this track is, on all the tracks here, is really slick, really strong. But this kind of starts a little bit of a problem I have with the album. It's not like a catastrophe or something that's, cracks leading to a huge failure here. But some of the tracks on this album just seem to be missing some oomph to it. I kept coming back when I was listening to the album over again, that there's a little bit of bite. A little bit of the bite is missing to it. There's just something missing. And this is one of the songs you start to kind of hear that a little bit. It's got a really catchy chorus, and the band sounds tight, of course. And again, I think Eric and Tommy really help with that. One constant throughout the album, even if I don't like the track, which I like this track. I think it's a solid track. But even on some of the other tracks I don't necessarily like as much. One of this constants throughout the entire album is Tommy Thayer's solo work. Really clean, really slick. Whether he did it on purpose or not, I would think he does do it on purpose. But he does throw in a lot of Ace Frehley licks. There's a lot of things you hear that are very Ace Frehley, but he also throws in his own stuff too. So I'm sure there's a little nod to that in there, because he knows that's what makes a classic Kiss track sound. Is that kind of the Ace kind of style. But of course, Tommy is also really technically proficient. When I saw him live, I mean, he was really one of the better guitar players I've ever seen in person. Unfortunately, I never had the pleasure of seeing Ace play live, but at least in Kiss, hopefully if he still does solo tours around here, I can stop by and see him. But Tommy was just really just a true professional and really, really solid on the guitar. I really like watching him play. Same with Eric. I mean, Eric, like a really good drummer, is the most fun to watch. Like you could just watch them playing the drums without any other instrumentation behind it. And Eric, obviously has played these songs, maybe not these songs, of course, but he's been playing in Kiss for long enough where he knows these songs like the back of his hand. So he's, really solid player, makes it look effortless. But anyway, Mick, what do you got on Russian Roulette? I mean, you got your guy Gene taking on vocals on this one.
Yeah, no, I think some of the comments that I was going to make were very similar to what you had mentioned. I like the chorus, but like we talked about on Psycho Circus, like one of the things I really liked about Psycho Circus was Gene's vocals. I thought he really whether he did or not, I felt like he put a lot into Psycho Circus, and I don't know if it was an aspect of there being an 11 years between Psycho Circus and Sonic Boom, and I think that might be the longest between their studio albums. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, I think Russian Roulette could have been a very good grudgy Gene song, but it just didn't do it for me. The chorus had its moments, and I really I listened to it a couple of times today, and that's really all I could be the chorus is good, but it just didn't do it for me, and I think that that was part of it. So
yeah, I definitely agree. Like I said, the chorus is probably the overall saving grace of this track for sure. So anyway, Russian Roulette, Gene, first foray into the new era of Kiss on this album. Like I said, chorus is great, overall solid track, and Tommy's guitar licks and solos are primo. Anyway, Never Enough. Next one here, we got Tommy and Paul writing the track and Paul singing it. So you get Tommy, not his first credit with Kiss, of course. He's been working with Kiss for decade plus by this point. This one has 80s Kiss kind of all over it. I think it's got a lot of something off of Lick It Up.
Yeah.
Paul's vocals are really strong overall on this one. Catchy, but and one thing I like about the song most and Paul's vocals is kind of dual harmonies he does throughout the song, which is something we haven't really heard up to this point on the album. I know we're only 3 tracks in, but Paul kind of throwing a nice little curveball there with the dual harmonies. So, but yeah, did you have anything on this track, Mick?
Yeah, no, I thought it's funny you mentioned the 80s, because I was trying to going through this album, I was trying to think back to what songs the tracks on here reminded me of previous Kiss ones, and I couldn't pinpoint it, but yeah, I wrote a very upbeat and catchy song, and definitely thinking back to some of their tracks from the 80s, Never Enough reminds me of it. And in terms of obviously I'm not a musician, and so I don't know what goes into picking the singles for the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm definitely glad they picked Never Enough as one of those singles. I think it was not my favorite track on the CD, but definitely a song that I think Kiss can be proud of. Yeah,
and like I said, they got all of the tracks on here have got really kind of big choruses. The old adage, "Don't bore us, get to the chorus," and it works. Like I said, it's a solid single here. Obviously, they've been doing this for long enough, so they know what to look for. Probably how long the song is, in terms of catchiness, and Paul had his song with Modern Day Delilah, so Gene probably wanted to. Well, I'm sorry, Paul wrote this one too, but but it just terms of just how strong they think the song is, and like I said, I think chorus overall, because it's got to have that hook to it to get the radio play. So yeah, solid track. Yes, I know nobody's perfect, so we got Gene again here. Just Gene on vocals, Gene writing it. Really dig the intro guitar riff on this one. You get the classic thing where Gene shouts "yeah" to like announce that he's on the song. Like he always does that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like kind of like all the rest of the tracks so far, really solid production and solid playing wise, but it just, I don't want to say it doesn't sound inspired, because of course they are, and like Paul's mission statement for the album, but it just, some of the tracks, and this is one of them, it feels like it's just a little off, and it's missing some of that like aggression, like really just totally letting go. But you do, of course, get some classic Gene vocals on this one.
Yeah. I don't know, like the vocals and the lyrics in this track, like super sleazy at times.
Mm-hmm.
But I really enjoyed this track.
Okay.
Like the first, like, so like one of the lyrics is like he's talking about knight in shining armor, and he says, and that's me. Like that's, it's kind of lame, like at times, but
yeah,
like a minute into the song, like they get into the chorus, and then like after that first minute, like I really dig the song. And I get 2 minutes and 25 seconds into the song, like there's like that, I think you were talking about like that pause, and he's like, yeah, and then gets back into the song, and like to someone who's not a Kiss fan, like they might hear that and be like, okay, that's that's kind of lame, or whatever, but like that, to me, that's just classic Gene, and I like listening to a song, like I appreciate like those little pieces to it,
Sure.
So like being a huge Gene fan and everything, and like this and Modern Day Delilah are probably like my favorite two tracks on the album. So I really like this one.
Yeah, right on. I mean, again, you're a big Gene guy, and like I said, the little Gene things and little Kiss classic kind of things in there might be lost on someone who doesn't listen to Kiss as much. But yeah, like it's always nice just to be reminded and have those little, however small or insignificant they may seem, to be, have those in there. It's like the nice little fan service moment or whatever. Stand is the next track here, written by Paul and Gene. Also, you get dual vocals from Paul and Gene on this one, which is like we were talking about earlier, which is sweet. Some nice guitar work and harmonies in the intro. But like the standout for this track is you get the dual vocals from Paul and Gene, which sometimes I wish like every track had it, because Paul is much more the melody guy, and Gene has like that great aggression in it. I really like this track. They seem to be really having fun on this one, and again, whether that's because Gene and Paul are both singing on it, who knows? But again, a great solo from Tommy. Like I said, he's slaying it on the whole album and really, making it his own. Excuse me. And they have a cool kind of moment. It's not at the end, but it's towards like, if it's towards the end of the track, where like it's kind of just becomes like the arpeggio guitar, like really kind of they bring down the instruments, and there's like this like angelic vocals going on, like almost the a cappella harmonies going on, which is kind of a cool Kiss moment on this track.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, like this one reminds me of like an anthem almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like thinking back to Psycho Circus, there are some songs on there that like listening to them, it's like you want to hold up a lighter and wave it in the air. So I definitely like this song, and I thought it was catchy as well. Yeah,
like I said, I think they're starting to break free a little bit on this, and this one definitely sounds like. I mean, this one sounds like they're having some serious fun on this track, and like I said, it's probably a lot of that comes from the trade off of Gene and Paul on dual vocals on this one.
Yeah.
Next track is Hot and Cold, and no, it is not the Katy Perry song. But again, it's that'd be weird. I would love to see Kiss just cover like a Katy Perry album. But anyway, Gene on vocals, Gene writing it. You get the we're talking about Gene announcing himself, and this one he actually does in the beginning. Oh yeah. And this one kind of sounds like, again, just to put a era or an album on it, it's got a bit of a Rock and Roll Over vibe to it, which is cool, because Rock and Roll Over is, if it's not my second favorite Kiss album, it's my third. So, I love Rock and Roll Over, and it's got that kind of vibe to it. But again, I think it's gone like the aggression and the bite to it's gone down a little bit from the previous track. But I dig the first thing I thought about when I heard it, besides Gene shouting "Oh yeah," is the Rock and Roll Over era.
Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned the Katy Perry thing, because I was listening to it again today, and I didn't even realize it, and then all of a sudden I heard the hot, because they have it, if it's too hot, you're too cold; if it's too loud, you're too old. Mm-hmm. Which is just like one of those classic, like simple lyric, but like only Kiss would think of like a lyric like that, But yeah, I mean, it's it didn't stand out to me on the album, but it's one of those songs that has some classic Kiss, like I said, lyrics in it.
Yeah, I love the idea of Kiss in their elderly age, not elderly, but older age at this point, reminding us that if it's too loud, you're too old, kind of thing. Like they forever want to stay as that young kind of band, and the makeup is something that helps with that illusion, which is kind of cool. So next track we got is All the Glory, written by Paul and Gene, but we get Eric Singer on vocals, which is cool. I think Eric's got a strong voice. I don't know if he would like it, me saying this, but he definitely has, whether it's on purpose or not, there's a bit of a Peter Criss kind of raspiness to it. Again, maybe I'm just hearing that because he's the drummer in Kiss, and I think that, but there's a little bit of a rasp to it, which is kind of cool. But overall, honestly, not one of my favorite tracks on the album.
Yeah. No, I was actually going to ask you, because I wasn't sure. Does Eric, and I don't want to get ahead on the tracks, but does Eric Singer, does he sing in any of the songs?
Well, he sings on this track.
Okay, but sorry, or is it Tommy Thayer or Eric Singer? Who's the?
Eric Singer's the drummer, so he plays on this one, and then later on, Tommy Thayer does sing on one of the tracks as well.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, no, I was going to ask you who the vocals were, because the first time I listened to it, it didn't even register with me that it wasn't, Paul or Gene, and then second time I listened to it, I wasn't sure, but I like the intro to this one.
Yeah.
And then, I'm curious now, like, obviously knowing that it was Eric Singer, like what this song would sound like if it was Peter Criss, doing the vocals, how differently would the song sound? Which unfortunately we'll never know, but, I'm just curious, but, this one didn't stand out to me much either. So
yeah, kind of just generic rock and roll track. It's probably one they would have given to Peter Criss if the original band was still, in the lineup, because Eric Singer's got a nice sounding voice, but Peter Criss's voice is very dynamic, with that Rod Stewart type of rasp to it. So maybe that would have added a little extra stank to it or funk to it. Who knows? But yeah, it's all right. Not one of my favorite tracks in the album. Danger Us by Paul Stanley, written by Paul Stanley, sung by Paul Stanley. Really dig the intro to this one. Some cool, solid guitar riffage and nice riff work. Paul's vocals again are strong on the whole album, but I think are pretty strong on this track overall. And like I said, Tommy consistently bringing the guitar work on this one. I just feel like this is kind of the last track where I feel like they're holding back a little bit. And maybe that's just me. I don't know if you hear it, but like the last three, like just to jump ahead real quick, like the last three tracks we're going to talk about after this, I like love. But I feel like this is like the kind of there's still a little bit holding back on this one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Like, like really the only thing that I was trying to listen to the lyrics and make some connections off of there, and they have the danger you, danger me, dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's obviously danger us.
Yeah.
And I was knowing Kiss, like I'm like I wonder if they're like trying to do like a play on words, like danger us, but yeah, I think it felt like these really from Hot and Cold, All for Glory and Dangerous. Like, it was almost like they were like, hey, let's put these ones in the middle. So, we got, some tracks on the front end and the back end. Because, I just didn't feel it on this track either.
Yeah.
So
again, I don't think there's any track on here that's necessarily bad. There's some that just maybe don't really connect, like some like modern day Delilah does. But I think the strong thing is, again, the production quality is really strong. Paul's been doing this for years, and it sounds good. The band sounds tight and like well rehearsed, and obviously all of them have been doing this combined for decades and decades and decades at this point. But the next track is the one I really wanted to get to. It's my favorite track on the album, and one that you could probably call Sonic Boom, but instead it's called I'm an Animal. Of course, that's just the classic Gene thing. I feel like that's what he wakes up and he looks in the morning, he's brushing his teeth. He's like, I'm an animal. It's written by Paul, Gene, and Tommy, sung by Gene. Awesome riff during the intro. Really dug it. And then this one I feel like really lets loose, like opens the floodgates. Just super heavy. Classic Kiss. You get a yeah from Gene if like you're always gonna get. A lot of it reminds me of She from the early Kiss era, which is one of my favorite Kiss tracks. Really great chorus too. You can hear Paul cut through on the vocals on that one. Again, like talking about hearing the difference in vocals and difference in the lead singers. You can hear Paul kind of cut through really well on it with Gene on his vocals. I just wish some of the more songs had this kind of jam to it. And just a great vocal outro. I just think a really great badass track. And like I said, definitely my favorite track on the album.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, like, I feel like you already mentioned, like, they let loose on this one. And, it's just, like, just looking at the track, the track title, sorry. Mm-hmm. You see that and you're like, okay, like, this is going to be a good Kiss song,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, it's like they hit the reset button after those last three, and this one definitely is it's a standout track on the album. Not my favorite, but it's a standout track. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I kind of wish they would have like put it up a little earlier in the track list, to get you kind of going a little earlier in the album.
Yeah.
But still, like I said, I didn't really remember this song when I was re-listening to it. And I was just surprised. I was like, wow, this is a solid, like a really awesome, like I'd pull this off of the album to put on like a mix, with Kiss stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, really, really dug this one. And like I said, definitely went back and listened to it a couple times before I finished up my notes. When Lightning Strikes is the next one. Again, you get Tommy and Paul writing the song. This is the one where you get Tommy Thayer on vocals. He sounds like kind of like a mix between Paul and Gene a little bit. You can easily mistake him for probably one or the other if you weren't really quite paying attention or didn't know. But again, of course, because you get Tommy writing it and Tommy singing it, you get the two guitarists writing it. Really great guitar work on it. Really, really loved it. I felt 80s vibe era. I don't know what you felt on this one, but I kind of got an 80s era Kiss, which isn't a bad thing. I know, like when Sam and I, Chris, was lucky enough just to do Lick It Up with me, but then Sam sludged through all of kind of what I consider just really a low period with Kiss in the 80s, leading up to what I love to close out the that decade with Revenge. But so, 80s era, when I say 80s era, I don't mean that necessarily as a bad word, because there are some great shining moments in it. It's just not my favorite era, but this is a song where I would use that as a compliment. I like the 80s era vibe on this one, and I like the guitar and vocal line mimicking each other a lot on this track.
Yeah, I really like. I don't remember some of the lyrics verbatim, but just listening to the track, like I like some of the way, like they include like just some of the phrases that they had in the lyrics. Mm-hmm. I thought were really catchy for this song.
Yeah.
And like I like that Kiss and I don't know if they did this on purpose or, what was behind it, but I like, because again, I wasn't sure who was vocals for this one. Same with, all for the glory. So, knowing that it was Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer, I think that's really, just like really cool to see that, all the members kind of had, lead vocals on a song, and, especially with it being the first album with all four of them.
Yeah.
And, it's almost like, hey, like reassuring, if there were Kiss fans out there who were like, is this four going to really mesh together well? Like, hey, these guys, aren't just throwing on the makeup and staying up there and, playing their instruments or hitting on the drums. Like, these guys are, musicians and can do all the things that, we need, them to do as members of Kiss. So, no complaints about the vocals from either of them. On those two tracks. And like I said, I really like just the wording of some of the lyrics that they use in this song.
Yeah, and obviously Tommy takes over Ace vocals when they play the classic Ace tracks, and Eric takes over the Peter vocals, especially on like a song like Black Diamond and Beth. So they got their vocal duties cut out for them because, again, if you're in Kiss, and especially if you're part of that era, and you're Tommy playing the Spaceman and Eric playing the Catman, you got to be able to sing. And I think a musician who is really talented at an instrument and understands the art of playing an instrument and whether they read music or not, I think can get away with basic singing capabilities, or basically putting out some kind of vocal or having some kind. I mean, look at Dave Mustaine, but having some kind of solid voice to it. And I think they're above that. They bring something to it. Tommy seems to fit perfectly with Gene and Paul vocally, and same with Eric. So yeah, I mean, I like this track. I like this track a lot, and I also like the fact that it's called "When Lightning Strikes." Of course, dealing with so much of Tommy's attire is dealt with lightning bolts and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a nice little nod to that. The last track's called "Say Yeah," written by Paul, sung by Paul. I like the solid driving beat on this one. Like I said a couple tracks ago, I think the last three tracks are is a great wham bam thank you ma'am kind of 3-track in your face kind of way to end the album. Paul's voice sounds really, really great on this track in particular. I think kind of like we've been saying, everyone's voice sounds pretty great, but I think Paul's voice sounds really, really solid on this one. This song is clearly, like a lot of Kiss songs, written for crowd participation. Especially in the chorus there. But I think overall a fun track and a pretty solid way to end the album.
Yeah. No. Again, my notes on this was it was the perfect closing track for Sonic Boom. It kind of reminds me of like a Shout It Out Loud type track, just in terms of, like you said, the crowd participation. And there's that one part kind of near the end of the track where they slow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they pick it back up fairly quickly. And I was, and re-listening to the song, because I didn't remember that piece from when I listened to it previously. I was glad they picked it up quickly. Like, I didn't want like listening to the song, I didn't want like kind of that like slow kind of end to the song. Like, yeah. I'm glad they picked it back up and ended on a high note as they did. And this being the third single for the track, for the album, I thought it was a good choice as well. So, good way to end Sonic Boom, I think.
Yeah, and overall, like I said, I think the problems I had with the album weren't catastrophic. I mean, like I said, some of it is generic at times, and some of it sounds harsh to say, but some of it sounds like, I guess the best way I could put it, and I don't necessarily mean it that way, is like a little bit uninspired and like holding back a little bit. But there's plenty of moments there. I think Paul proves his point with the album. Like, they're still kicking ass. They're still writing music that sounds like you could still plug in, oh, that sounds like, 70s era Kiss, 80s era Kiss, sounds like it'd be a rock and roll over, at least in my mind. And I think that's a win for them. And of course, there's plenty of moments on there that prove that they still know what they're doing, especially with especially with this new lineup that they have that's still going on today. And I think those last tracks, 3 tracks for me, personally or in particular, really put it over the edge of just being a well-produced sounding album to a pretty solid album overall. Yeah. And so, really we only have one more album to do after this, which is crazy to think that's just coming to an end. I think this podcast has taken, but when it's all said and done, it's already been a year since we started it, the Kiss podcast. Yeah. So, anyway, like I said, we're gonna work on having Mick around for the last one. I appreciate you coming on for this one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And like I said, we only got one more left. It's called Monster, and that's what we're gonna end it with here on the next month's episode. So remember, kids, rock and roll all night and party every day. Thanks for listening.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday, and you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.